Welcome back to our little podcast where we talk about the occult, the supernatural, horrors that haunt your backyard, and a sense of creepiness that hits far too close to home. Today, we'll be covering something very close to Vanessa, me, and the whole team that we have here. Tales that we all grew up with, whether it was kind of an awkward laugh that we'd share with each other, or the kind of thing that makes us just kind of wonder and avoid a certain bridge, wonder about a certain building, not want to be alone in a certain theater. We'll be talking about some local stories that our city of San Jose, which these stories are kind of a few that we just know and we've had shared to us as others have shared to each other for quite a few years.
When it comes to San Jose, the first thing everybody thinks of is the Winchester Mystery House. And can I just say, I am so over that damn house. Like, I'm just over it.
I mean, I think anymore, and mind you, I've only really had the time and effort to go there once. I think the fascination about the house isn't really something spiritual. It's more of a fascination of how the fuck does this thing exist?
Money.
But it's worth going to once. But after that, I mean, there's some other things that are a little bit scarier at the end of the day.
So I never been to that house. I've been outside of it, but I've never been inside of it. But that's not the only haunted house San Jose has a claim to fame on. Actually, my family's been living here for a few generations, and everybody's claimed to live in a haunted house, and we can go on stories about that. But one of the most notable haunted houses is the Hell House on Hellier, aka Center of Hell, because it's on Cedar Road and Hellier on the corner. The 3-bedroom house, built in 1988, has long since been speculated to be vacant due to its supposed haunting, but according to Twitter and Google reviews, the house is indeed occupied by an older woman. On Google review, somebody by the name of Robert Gammon wrote, quote, "This is my grandma's house, bruh." Yeah. So why is this scary? Well, the lore that follows is vastly juicy and ever-changing based on who you ask. Since the house is only 33 years old, you'd think you'd be able to find out more info on any of the alleged murders, but no luck. All I know is hearsay. And the main story is a Vietnamese family being murdered in the house. One account is of a robbery gone wrong, but besides that, the main legend is that a girl who lived in the house got pregnant and hung herself in the garage because of shame. Other variants of the story suggest that she killed her family prior to hanging herself, and another one states that she hung herself because she couldn't bear losing the property her parents had promised her, but had lost because of financial woes, causing the family to have to sell it. In any case, the house was put up for sale. However, strange things happened in nowhere. Oh, I know you don't get that reference, Casey. It's okay. So the house began doing all the stuff, all the pinche chingaderas that haunted houses do. Flashing lights, electronics turning on by themselves, random door slamming, the works. So the family decided to get help by the aid of monks, quote unquote monks. That's what this says in the legend, who came to the house and spent 3 days there in attempts to diagnose and cleanse the house. Now, allegedly, on the second night, they woke up in the garage, the monks, with no knowledge of how they got there. They thought that the spirits left in the house was the cause, and as a safeguard, had the family place 3 boulders outside of the house to protect the community. Many people have tried so many times to get into that house. I've seen and heard many people breaking in and out of the house, reporting strange things like seeing glowing red eyes, their equipment and gear being scattered about. Supposedly, neighbors have said that they've heard random banging and seen flashing lights in the house. Now, again, according to Twitter, a woman lives there whom, according to the DoorDasher's tweet in 2020, I hate delivering to this house. The lady be mad creepy. To that, I say, I would be a bitch too if y'all assholes kept gathering in front of my house, trying to take a picture and break in. By the way, they have cameras outside the house now.
First of all, I fucking would too. Second of all, I'd be terrified to live there. Half because of the fucking crazy shit that's going on there, and the other half because people are breaking into my house all the time. So, if y'all hearing this, stay the fuck away from that house.
Yeah, let the lady be in peace. I looked and I couldn't find anything that confirmed the murders of that house. But, you know, San Jose is good at covering stuff up, so, you know, you won't get any of the information out of anybody who lives there. Like, apparently people have tried to talk to the owners, tried to talk to that woman, and they're not saying anything. The neighbors, to what I've seen online, is the neighbors never say anything about the murders, but they always see that they've seen, like I said earlier, like they've seen stuff happen, like flashing lights, or they hear bangings.
I mean, not to disrespect the spirit of a ghost story, but once again, flashlights and home invasions.
Yeah.
But it's also probably haunted, I'll be honest. Our next story is one that I think is a little less known than the house in Hellier, but is still quite an old one with quite a bit of a creepy history. And it centers around a pond that exists on the Brunel family ranch. Dotties Pond is about I believe, 100-year-old story. I tried doing a bit of research on my own to pinpoint exactly who was involved in the story and about what time it took place. Some of the details have gotten a bit sketchy, and the story itself tends to change a little bit over the ages, but it's one that I heard again and again since being in high school, and there's still lots of information, lots of pages being updated, and it's still quite an interesting one. And as many urban legends do, the tale of Dotties Pond, it has these details, like I mentioned, that do vary from person to person. But typically, this story portrays a teenager named Dottie. She comes home from a dance. Sometimes the details will drift, but generally it's accepted that she got into an argument with her parents. Some people say that it's because she was in love with a boy that they didn't approve of. Some people say that it's because she came home late and her parents were quite discipline-oriented. Regardless what happened, they got into an argument, one in which she stormed out. Some people say that she went to go pack her bags. Other people say that she just stormed over to the family barn. Regardless what happened, there is a altercation. According to the legend, she had killed both of her parents, either in their bed by slitting their throats and drug them into the barn. Others say that she had lifted them off the ground and strangled them, almost like in a telekinetic sense. But regardless what happened, the detail that stays the same is she hung their bodies, I'm assuming by a noose, up in the rafters of the barn, leaving them there to hang. She was so struck with grief that she went over to their local spring or pond that they had. She, according to some, threw herself in, drowning herself, letting herself be taken by the water because she was filled with grief. Others say that hands rose from the water, grabbing her in, pulling her under into a watery demise as punishment for what she had done. But according to the legend, Dottie died that night, as it sealed her fate, but also created something, this legend that just stirs around for over 100 years. And to this day, you can go visit Dotties Pond. It's in San Jose, on the Brunel family ranch. I think sometimes they do tours, though I'm not quite sure how it's been recently. But they say that if you go there during the nighttime, you can hear crying. You can hear Dottie crying. Because she never really wanted to kill her parents, because she regretted it. And she never really wanted to kill herself, because she never really wanted to die. Others say that if you get too close to the water, the same hands that grab Dottie and pulled her under will slip up your ankle onto your leg and grab you and pull you under as well, leaving you to a similar fate.
The area of Dotties Pond actually has a lot of energy to it, and I won't go into details about the legend because I don't know a lot about it. Plus, two, a lot of native tribes are secretive with some of their legends for obvious, appropriate reasons. But the Ohlones know of that area to be high with energy prior to like the Dottie story. So there's history there besides that. Speaking of Ohlones, that is a perfect segue into our next haunted place in San Jose. No longer named Peter Burnett after the city did an attempt at wokeness and renamed the school as Ohlone Middle School, but they can't take down that fucking statue. Legend has it that a girl fell off of the upstairs steps from the locker room and died. Her ghost now haunts the school and can sometimes be heard in the locker room crying. I actually went to this lice-infested school and I do remember the story. So did my mom. She went there in 79 to like 82 and she remembers that story. My family actually, a lot of my family went to that school, so I asked my tia, who is about 15 years older than my mom, and she says she remembers that story, but according to legend, the girl would have died around the time my tia went to school, and she doesn't remember somebody dying, but she remembers hearing the legend then. And so like I said, my mom went there in like 79. That was her 6th grade year. My tia is 15 years older than my mom, so she would have been there in the mid-60s. So if it happened in the 60s, like I said, my tia should have heard about the girl, but she doesn't remember it. And then my other tia and my Nino, who are older than both of them, they went to that school and they never heard anybody dying. So, using my family as a reference to try to backtrack how far this legend goes, it just seems to go back to the 60s, but I can find no account of the girl actually dying, who this girl was. I remember being in the locker room and thinking it was creepy. And I remember the steps that she allegedly died off of at the time. I don't know about now, but at the time there was no guardrail and it was easy for somebody to fall. I remember thinking that, like, I don't want to be on the steps. I'm afraid of heights anyways. I could definitely see how somebody could fall and die from those steps, but like I said, I can't find anything, but I know that the locker rooms are super creepy. But that being said, a lot of people report that they hear somebody crying in those locker rooms. I mean, granted, it could just be like an angsty 12-year-old, but, hiding somewhere's in there. But it's not just that, like, lockers will start slamming out of nowhere. They'll hear giggles and all that good creepy stuff. But that's not the only haunted school in San Jose. Del Mar High is another one. In the 40s, a kid was stabbed by his best friend on the field which the school would later be built on. The school was built in 57 and it didn't open till 59. But if you go to the athletic field at 3:15 a.m., you can supposedly hear his screams. And there's been people who've actually sat there and recorded, and they'll hear stuff on EMF and stuff. So I definitely think that is something we should do ever. And then we also have San Jose State. And this is kind of a bleak and tragic history, and not just San Jose's history, but in America's history as well. You can find this in San Jose State's webpage. On May 24th and 25th in 1942, the San Jose State building known as the Yoshihiro Hall served as a registration center for 2,487 people of Japanese descent before they were forcibly moved to 11 camps across the nation. A cross-section of the 120,000 that were incarcerated for periods of up to 4 years. People have reported hearing screams and cries in this hall at night, and it's a bleak and echo reminder of what this country has done to its citizens and what they are continuing to do.
I mean, jogger just seems like such a silly thing in comparison to what you just said.
On a lighter note,
The next one, in my opinion, has always been one that's been a bit more silly. It's one that actually strikes quite close to home for me, as it's a street that was very close to my house, and I actually had to take it to get to school, as it was the main road and the road that my school was on in high school. And that's the tale about the Quimby Jogger. It's a man who goes basically jogging around midnight, typically. Some people say that they're missing a head. The others say that it's just a ghostly figure in the night. When spotted, they'll usually jump into a nearby bush and disappear. But I'll be quite honest, most often when you're on Quimby and you see someone, I think you have worse things that you need to worry about. Usually just some asshole teens hanging around, or just some people. I'll be quite honest, I didn't know about this until partway through high school, and I typically stayed out really late doing all kinds of shit. And quite a few times, I'm in school, I was in cross country, and I was on my way home, and there were many times I was on Quimby, and I was just like, going for a brisk jog, and people looked at me and they were fucking scared to shit, right? And I didn't know why, and I thought about it later on. I'm just like, bruh, it's like 1 a.m, or it's like 12 midnight, and I'm like literally in a sweatshirt just jogging. Or sometimes I'd be like, oh shit, my parents are gonna be really mad at me, so I'd be like sprinting home, and I'm like, yeah, no, I can see why people looked at me like a freak. That does kind of make sense.
You heard it first. The Quimby Jogger has been confirmed as Eva.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's a very old legend, Stephanie. Another one that's relatively in the same area of San Jose is Dove Elementary. Over the decades, teachers, other staff, and students have reported the presence of a supernatural student named Michael. How do we know? Well, it's because it's on his name tag. According to reports, a small boy can be seen on the campus. When you approach him, you can see that he has a name tag that simply says Michael, but the boy has no face at all. It's actually kind of interesting. That entire area over there has always been, every single school I know has a particular ghost or event or something that is supposed to be incredibly terrifying. I actually remember a friend of mine telling me there is a path right on the creek. Is it Silver Creek? This is the one that goes right by Silver Creek. Is that the name of the actual creek? Yeah. She had to walk that way to get to school every day. And I remember she was telling me it was around the rainy season and, everything was soaking wet. It's basically like between Eastridge and Silver Creek right there. And there is a bridge there. And the bridge used to be fairly open, and it went straight over the creek. And after a while, they put cages on that. And I remember when she was telling me that 3 different people in the last 5 or so years committed suicide there.
Shit.
One was a student. Shortly after, her father committed suicide there. And a couple years later, it was a copycat. And she was dead terrified because she swore every time that she went past that, she felt someone watching her. I remember one time she was saying she always felt a heavy presence there. And mind you, this was in the same area, right off when we were there. And she told me that she always felt a presence watching her, and there was on occasion where her, and then on occasion some friends that she knew in the same area, they went to go walk over to the bridge to get to school in the morning. Mind you, it's school starts super early, so it's really dark, and it gets pretty foggy over there. And they saw the dark figure of a man sitting on top of the where the cage is on top of the bridge.
So next up, moving to the south side of San Jose, is Hacienda Cemetery. This legend is not a whole figure, but just a part. It's about the haunted hand, and if you're out on All Hallows Eve, then beware of the Hacienda Cemetery, unless you're an Evil Dead fan. I was prior to the show, mind you. Anyways, the new Almaden Cemetery is the residence to a lonesome hand. Back in 1896, 13-year-old Richard Bretman Barrett, aka Bert, lost his arm in the Almaden Hills. It was a hunting accident gone wrong and he shot off his arm. So back then, local law required that you buried any severed limbs, and thus the family did, and it gave it a little wooden gravestone, which you can still see today. It says, "His arm lies here, may it rest in peace." Local legend says that each year on Halloween night, Barrett's arm comes alive and rises out of its tomb. And then it tries to reunite with the rest of Bert's body, which ironically is not there because he died about 61 years later and now he's pushing up Daisy's That'll Kill. Daisy's That'll Kill. Shout out to Casey. Shout out to Anita Fix. So, the location of this severed limb is in the Hacienda Cemetery. If y'all want to check it out on All Hallows Eve, it's 21440 Bretman Road in New Almaden. Yes, it's actually named after his family because they were very prominent in the area. It's located in the southern section of the cemetery. It's something I actually want to check out. I would love to just see the just walking kind of like thing in the Addams family. Da-da-da-da.
You know, I'm just going on a limb here, but I don't think this one's that dangerous.
Oh, you're Barry Bunny.
Mm-hmm.
And next we have the Hicks Road albinos. And this one is actually one of the first scary stories I've ever heard about San Jose because my older cousin Nana, she told me about it. And for the record, can I just state now that I hate this one because of the ignorance and prejudice people with albinism face.
I just want to say that this is one that I swear, like, everyone in my family has heard of this. The old fuckers have heard of this. The young fuckers have heard of this. Somehow it's just everyone's heard about it in San Jose.
To fill you guys in, apparently Hicks Road plays home to a satanic cult of albino witches. And why I don't like this one is because it just has all those key points of just like being prejudiced and having stigma against people with albinism. And let me just say that this is a very boomer-esque legend.
I think it's like a 60-year-old story.
Yeah, that sounds like
maybe a bit older. I don't know. You know the walrus at the place we used to work at?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mentioned it to him, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, we used to talk about it all the time when I was a kid." Like, what was he, like 50 years old?
Yeah. That means so the whole thing is like if you are driving down Hicks Road at night, you might see them doing their satanic worship, or they might come and chase you out of their area and stuff like that. But you know, the way people were treated with like albinism, I would assume that this story had some you know, like in lore, like everything has a backstory in it. Like, you know, shout out to Aaron Mankey. There was probably a family out there who probably was treated like crap for having albinism. People probably try to fuck with them and they chase them off of their property to defend themselves. And that's probably where this legend comes from. Because people are dicks.
Not to blame a bunch of kids, but I mean, this typically is the kind of thing that a bunch of high schoolers usually make up about like an area that's, you know, just forested.
Yeah. And that being said, like, people with albinism still face a lot of prejudice today, how they're treated. And I know I keep going on and on about it, but that's how I feel about protecting people. It's like these people, I mean, certain parts of the world still think that having sex with somebody who has albinism will cure HIV, or that their limbs contain magical properties. So having like, stories like this in the US kind of just perpetuate stuff that they face globally. So that's why this is not a favorite of mine.
I always saw this story as more of like one of those oddities that's kind of like, you're not laughing at the contents of the story, but you're laughing at the fact that it's existed this long because it's so ridiculous.
Pretty much, yeah. It's very dated and tasteless. Sorry, sorry, not sorry. And
boomers.
I would just like to end this on a road that is also ironically in the same area. It's all by your hood. The last one on our list is San Felipe Road. And that one's jam-packed because the whole road is apparently haunted. The main thing I want to talk about is the school on top of San Felipe Road. Legend has it that it was either the late 1800s or early 1900s. The school teacher there got mad at her husband killed him, and then proceeded to hang her 22 students. And so legend has it, if you drive on San Felipe Road at night, the windshield will fog up and you'll see the little hands.
I have not heard of that one.
That's the legend. Again, I couldn't find a lot of this stuff, but it is something to think about too, that we forget that, like, not too long ago, this area was owned by Mexico. I believe California didn't become a state till 1848. That's less than 200 years ago. So some of these legends, we don't know if they crossed over from back then. I don't know if the school teacher was there during the Spanish era or like, you know, so some of these legends in these areas are like very contemporary, but they might be based off of legends that were there prior to the switchover. You get what I'm saying? That concludes tonight's episode of Haunted San Jose. If you want to know more about, we probably are going to do more episodes, but there is a podcast called San Hauntse that I happened to stumble across in the researching of this episode, and shout out to them.
Well, I think that's where we'll leave everyone for today. Until next time, we come back with some more stories. Maybe some scary ones, maybe not. But regardless, we look forward to it.
So have a good night and keep the spooky alive.
I just want to take a moment to thank a couple of our Patreon subscribers. We really appreciate you, both Ben Turco and Haruta Pillar. You guys help make this a thing that we can do. You help make it so that we can have quality assurance and really motivate ourselves to kick each other in the asses and say, you know, we're going to try to take an extra step to do more. And we appreciate that. We want to make this, and you're making it so that we can give you the best of the best. So, thank you.